The studies we just covered from experimental philosophy and psychology reinforce the view that people's lay moral judgments are not the product of reason about cause and effect and intentionality. Instead, our lightning fast evaluation of character might skew our perception of cause and effect and intentionality without us necessarily realizing it. Person-based judgments are preconceptions about what type of person we're judging and our inferences about whether that person is likely to perform good or bad acts in the future. These might be more important to moral judgment than the apparent facts about cause, effect, and intentions. Let's look at some other ways that person-based accounts of moral judgment focus on people's propensity to ask, is this person good or bad, rather than is this act praiseworthy or blameworthy. Of course, we don't always ask that question, is this person good or bad, explicitly. Person-based theories propose that we learn about whether people are good or bad implicitly by keeping track of various features that are especially morally informative. There are some behaviors and features that people are just extremely quick to perceive as informative about moral traits. First, negative as opposed to positive behaviors inform character judgments more often. And this is proposed to be because positive behaviors are more likely to be performed for both pro-social and antisocial reasons, like social desirability and impression management. Whereas negative behaviors do not typically have that kind of flexibility in perceived intentionality. Of course, we can think of exceptions, such as negative behaviors that hurt but help us down the road, but by and large, positive behaviors tend to be considered less informative to moral character than negative behaviors. What else influences our perceptions of morality? Behaviors with fewer, less ambiguous motives in general are considered to be more informative to moral character. In other words, behaviors with high attributional ambiguity are low in informational value. If a person can convince other people that they did something because of A, B, C, D, and E, whereas another person can only come up with reasons A or B for their action, that second person will tend to appear more culpable in a character sense, simply because the two possible motives gain more potential informational value. This is a very general effect, and we'll see in a bit that some of the other effects that contribute to moral information might conflict with it. Next, behaviors that are rare statistically, that we don't expect to occur commonly, are more likely to be perceived as indicative of a person's moral character. Likewise, behaviors that are costly, that we know required sacrifice, we assume are personally valuable to a person, and therefore part of that person's moral commitments and values are on display by taking part in that costly behavior. Recent research showed that more heroic acts are seen as rarer and more costly to actors, but interestingly, not more beneficial to the recipients of the heroic acts or less obligatory. So more unusual and behaviors that require a lot of sacrifice are more likely to give us hints about moral character. Next, behaviors that are accompanied by authentic emotion are more likely to be morally informative. These behaviors can themselves entail costly displays like an eruption of anger, but they can also just be more subtle expressions, such as the expression of suspiciousness. When individuals and groups display anger in institutional settings, for example, this can be a costly display of authentic emotion that authenticates moral concerns. For example, conveying that injustice occurred and that the individual or group wishes to rectify it. Finally, behaviors that people perform extremely quickly, and they seem to have decided about very easily without hesitation, are perceived as informative about moral traits. These behaviors and decisions can be measured quantitatively in experiments that record reaction time. And we might see low reaction time and behaviors and decisions associated with a low reaction time to be more likely to be taken as morally informative about a person. Let's next look at a study that examined the morally informative nature of a small, statistically rare request.